Welcome to the UO Today podcast, conversations that offer a glimpse into the heart of the humanities at the University of Oregon. Listen as our faculty, students, and guests introduce ideas and research that help us reflect on the past, navigate the present, and imagine possible futures. I'm Leah Middlebrook, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. My guest today is Christopher Brown, a Portland-based musician, composer, bandleader, and educator who seeks to be an advocate for jazz music and American culture. As a guest of the Oregon Humanities Center, Brown will give a presentation performance with his jazz band. The performance, or the presentation, is titled Beyond the Buzz, Finding the Signal in a Noisy World. This event will take place on January 29th, 2026. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
We might start by just asking you to tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so born and raised here in Portland, Oregon. Try to give you the Reader's Digest version. Portland, Oregon, born in 1977, graduated high school in 1995, joined the Marine Corps. Did that from 95 to 99. Got out. I was out about 2 years, then re-enlisted in the military, joined the Army National Guard out in New Jersey, and then retired back in 2017. And I've done a good amount of traveling around the world, within the capacity of playing music. It's funny. One of the things that I kind of started to develop a while ago, when people ask me that question, is I go, how do I get them to really understand what I'm saying? And so I started coming up with this idea of like, let me give you my geographic journey and then give you my internal journey. So then that way you know from where I am actually speaking, because it matters, right? Like we were talking and all of a sudden I said, I lived in a cave for 15 years, like, right? So anyway, so big blocks, Portland, throughout the country in the Marine Corps, then out to New Jersey for 13 years and back to Portland in 2012. So that's the physical journey. Mentally, though, I would say a lot of my life has been oriented around music. Actually, the lion's share of it has been around music. With piano at 5, then saxophone and drums around middle school, 6th grade. Kept them all up over the years. Let's see. I wanted to be in New York City. Didn't know I was going to do that after high school. My dad was like, well, as soon as you're 18, you're out of the house. I'm like, well, that's funny because you don't live here. But okay. Because then my mom split when I was 2. But that was actually a really smart choice because I didn't know you can join the military to play music. And so I figured, well, I'm going to do this anyway. Why not get paid to do it? And so you can see there's been kind of like sort of a purposeful intention around music. Like much of my life is a complete accident. And so I was able to make it out to New York City and earn my stripes there, and then came back to Portland again, like I said, in 2012, with the hopes of bringing that information back here to be a big fish, perhaps in a smaller pond, just like what my dad did before me. He literally did the same thing, left and then came back because he wanted to be close to his parents, and it's kind of what I want to do as well.
What an interesting answer. You mentioned how music has been a through line for you, or sort of one of the poles. Excuse me. Where did that interest come from? Where do you see it beginning?
Initially, it's interesting. Initially with piano, it's because my mom, I think I was like 5 or 6, probably 6. And she goes, I think she just wanted me to play piano. And she goes, I don't know, we'll say their name was Johnny and Sally. It was like, hey, look, Johnny and Sally is excelling at piano. And I just remember looking at her face when she said that. And I go, well, I'll play piano too. Like that was it. All right. And then as I got older and I got into middle school, by then we're looking at 1988. My dad had left Diana Ross by roughly around then. He was kind of slowing down from doing that gig. And so once he came back, it was like more home because he'd be gone for like 8 months out of the year. between 79 and basically 1989. Um, my mom was like, here's your kid, hang out with him. And so I started being around my dad and watching people look at my dad the same way my mom responded to her coworker's kid playing the piano and me looking at her face. I remember thinking there's something really interesting about my dad. I don't know what it is. Somehow it's connected to this thing that he does. And so once I kind of walked through that door to see more of what that world was like, I was pretty taken by it. And so I said, I want to know what it feels like to walk in this guy's shoes. And it was cool because he would, he'd take me along with him and I get a chance to see his relationships. And I like those relationships. And so at the, to put a bow on that question or this answer, it all boils down to people, the power that music has to affect people.
And yes, listening to you, I was thinking about two things. I was thinking that probably, because I didn't mention this in the intro, but of course, your father's a musician, which people
Hmm.
may not know. Is it Mel Brown? Is that correct?
Correct. Hmm.
And what was his instrument? What was his specialty?
He's a drummer.
He's a drummer.
Hmm.
And the other point that you made that I just resonated with so much was being a kid and seeing when you were describing your mother's face and thinking about what it is when you see your parent really admire somebody.
Yep.
I'm so happy that you brought
Hmm.
that into the conversation. How did your military service inform your musicianship?
I think the idea of development, right? So you go, here's where I am, here's where I want to be. How do I bridge the gap? And one of the things that I like to think about is I'm a big leadership buff, so I'm a big fan of John Maxwell, if you know who that is. And he always talks about how in every talk you give, you got to have um, your important message and your big message. Your important message is what you're there to talk about. Your big message is what you are about. So when you think of like Simon Sinek, right? He's famous for his start with why talk. He's given a lot of talk since then about on a wide variety of subjects. But the through line is you can still hear his 2000 what 8 or 9 TED talk start with why. That's his big message. And so for me, I would say my big message is that learning is simple. It ain't always easy, but it is simple. It has to be simple. And why is that? Here's an interesting thought. There are two organizations that I think really successful organizations that have done really well with training people. It's McDonald's and the military, both of which are built on the backs of people that don't have to have a ton of education to do that job. So the military, if you think about it, is like the people who fight in the military, they're all really young. In fact, it's funny. I had a friend of mine years ago. We were talking about that movie Saving Private Ryan. And he goes, "My grandpa was in that, not like in the movie, but actual
Right.
Normandy D-Day, Omaha Beach."
Yeah.
And he said, "My grandpa was a medic." And so he asked him how he felt about that movie, and he said, "Yeah, like they did a great job. The sounds were right. The imagery was right." He goes, "The only thing that was wrong is the actors were all too old." He's like, "You got to remember, we were kids, right?" So going back to your question, how does the military inform it? Is we try to make everything idiot proof. Like it has to be so simple. You think about it, like you could take someone who you would barely give your car keys to, who's 17 or 18 years old because you'd be afraid they're going to scratch your car. And somehow within 14 weeks, you can make them a basically trained, competent military personnel and you can deploy them, right? And so I started thinking, I think whenever I get stuck in how I'm developing myself, my band, I go, there's actually a simple way to fix this, and I'm not seeing it yet. So keep trying to figure out a way to make this simple. It has to be simple. If not, then you have too much confusion.
What a great answer when we're talking about an art form that certainly as an outsider, I'm not a musician, but as an outsider, jazz is one of the most complex, demanding art forms
That's
there
right.
is. So,
Seemingly, seemingly, because everything has
seemingly,
to be simple. Yeah, that's right. A thought that I had a while ago was going back to the people being young, most of the people we study in school that we make people study in school, they were, I think we forget that they were young. Like Charlie Parker was 35 when he died, right? Or Clifford Brown was, I think, died at 24. We're still got grown adults still trying to figure out how these people figured out what they did at such a young age. And so that made me pose the question of either these people were truly geniuses or they were focused in on a target that no one told me to shoot at. And if you tell me to look at that thing, I could do what they do because they didn't have the luxury of having the latest technological advancements and education that we have in 2026. There was no schools that they were going to. So how did they figure that out? I wonder if we're thinking about it in the wrong way. And it's funny because there's a guy named Kenny Garrett, a great jazz saxophonist, one of the best in the world. And he came to Portland State in 2018, 19, something like that, for the Portland Jazz Festival. They brought him in. He came to the school and gave a little talk. And one of the first things he said, he goes, the irony of me being here right now is that you were being taught how to do what I do in a way that I was not taught how to do what I do. He goes, I learned it in the streets.
Yeah,
So maybe there was maybe, maybe this thing is not as complicated as we make it out to be.
fantastic. So you touched on this a little bit. Let's come back. So what brought you back to Portland and how did it feel to return after having been traveling and in so many
Yeah.
different spots?
Um, well, a couple things. One, I felt like I had played at most of the places that I wanted to play at New York and with the people that I wanted to. So I was kind of starting to get kind of not totally burnt out on New York, but like, all right, I think it's time to switch gears. But the big thing that actually catalyzed it though was my mom died in 2011. And so all of a sudden, all of my attention, pun intended, was on Portland and all the responsibilities, the weighty responsibilities that I had to contend with coming back here with cleaning up the house. And I got a younger brother who's a special needs guy, so I'm his guardian as well. And so I was like, you know what, I was already feeling like I was ready to come home, and this made it legit. Um, yeah, that's what made me come back
Hmm.
when I did.
I know that being an educator is an important part of your work as well. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your investment in education and teaching young
For sure.
musicians.
Yeah, education is medicine, right? So if I eat, I don't know, lima beans, I don't like lima beans, but if I eat it and all of a sudden all the blemishes on my face go away, I go, man, you got to try these lima beans, right? And so when I was in grad school, I needed money one summer, or the summer that I was in grad school, the first summer, and I took a job at this little podunk music school somewhere in East, or over in what is that? Oh yeah, East Brunswick, New Jersey. And so I was under the assumption that the people I was going to be working with were going to be high school students. Nope, end up being like 6 year olds and 7 year olds. And I was about to quit right then and there. I was like, nah. But then I had heard this little voice, the angel, the devil that's on your shoulder. And immediately this voice said, well, if you think you so bad, you should be able to teach what you know to anybody. And I said, oh, okay. So then I went home, I thought about it, and I go, this is just worth the challenge. Because really deep down with what I was subconsciously saying to myself is I don't think I'm equipped to talk about the things that I assert to know. And this is going to force me to have to contend with my belief system about anything. And so I went down the rabbit hole of trying to engage 6 and 7 year old kids. And so the thought that I developed then, which is what I still have now, which I tell all my students, I go, if you can explain something to the intellect of a 6 year old, you can explain it to a grown adult. And so all of my ideas I have about, like you said, seemingly complicated ideas about music that we usually touch on in school or whatever at the professional level. I go, how do I make this work to the intellect of a 6-year-old? And then I started this habit of just like, weirdly enough, some people like will talk to themselves out loud, walking in a circle in my office, and I'll go, this is what I believe. And then I'll spend the next 10 minutes trying to disprove it. And then once I think that that's good, I go, well, this feels pretty good coming out of my mouth. Then I'll spend maybe another 10 minutes trying to punch holes into that thing again. And once I come to a point where I go, I don't think this feels pretty airtight, then that's what I ride with. But every now and then I'll come back to it, after learning something new, and I'll go back and re-audit that old thing. I go, does that old belief still hold up? Which is why my definition of jazz music has not changed in the past 26 years, which is that jazz is a term used to describe popular American music at the turn of the 20th century. It has its roots in ragtime and blues. That's it. And where that came from, I didn't even make that up. When my first encounter when I got to school as a freshman, the guy who was in charge of like my chaperone, he goes, "Hey, let's go meet this guy that we call Prof. William Fielder." I go, "All right," and he was like the proverbial nutty professor, like kind of Einstein hair, no peripheral vision, thick Coke bottle glasses, dandruff. You can carve your initials in on his shoulder boards. I mean, it was a mess. And he sounded like an old Mike Tyson. So put all that together in your head. And I remember I stuck my hand out to shake his hand, uh, and I go, "Nice to meet you, sir." And he says nothing. He just stares at my hand and then gives me the once over, and then starts grilling me with questions. And we're in the hallway of the music, or the practice room sort of annex building. And at this point, I think some of the students that were practicing in the room heard this interaction. They were like, "Oh, fresh meat," because they're like, "Yeah, I remember when he probably did it to them." And now everyone's watching me negotiate this interaction with this weird guy, who's weirdly brilliant. And he goes, young man," he stuttered a lot. He was like, "What is the definition of jazz?" And all of a sudden I just start like this garbage just started spewing out of my mouth. And it was just like this word salad of things that I heard other people say. And I go, I think this sounds respectful. Blah, 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 blah. The stuff starts coming out of my mouth. And I'm barely believing half of what's actually coming out of my mouth. And I'm looking for like like the off ramp. So like, what I mean, like intellectual off ramp for me to stop talking. And I my hands are getting hot, and I'm just like, I want this to stop right now. I can't make my mouth stop. So then I finally find the exit ramp, and I go, "That's all I got." And he goes, "What?" He goes, "Nah, man." He goes, "That's not it." And the first thing he said, and I was like, wow, like a punch in the gut. He goes, "If you don't know how to talk about it, how do you know if you've even been doing it?" I said, "Okay, this is how this is going to play out." And he goes, "Here's my definition for jazz. Use it until you find a better one." I go, "Oh," because that's how science works. It's high level noticing.
That's great. And so, yeah, you've been testing it for all those years and you still come right back to it.
And still keep coming right back to it. And so me, again, to put a bow on this, my journey in music is really, or education has been a journey in me auditing me. And then my students are getting the spoils of those those gems.
And you teach at a number of levels now, right? Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
Do you run a session for high school students? Is that correct?
Yeah. So with the high school level, so I run the jazz program with the Metropolitan Youth Symphony, MYS here in Portland. Um, but I also have an independent thing that I do in concert with Montevilla Jazz, the Montevilla Jazz organization. And so they said they'd be willing to help me kind of get this idea up off the ground. So it's called Behind the Scene, and it's a thing I do the first Sunday of every month at a place called the 1905, which is the main jazz spot. It's kind of like Eugene's jazz station. And which I'll be there next week, actually next uh, Thursday. And so it's my way of being able to give kids a raw behind the scene look at what their experience might be if they had to go to a place like New York City, because it's easy to get chewed up and spit out by New York. People are, they care about, efficiency and they don't want you to slow them down. And the moment you look like you don't know what you're doing, you get ran over. Right. And so I don't want kids to have that kind of experience. I want them to feel well prepared because there were certain things that I did not feel adequately prepared for. Once I first got there, I figured out quickly what I needed to do. But that sort of shell shock moment, I think there's a way for people to not have that, you know. So so yeah,
What
it's
are
my way
some
of
of the
preparing for that.
what are some of the things you prepare them for, and how do you do that?
Yeah. So the way the thing is set up, the first 30 minutes my band plays, so you get a sense of how we sound and how we sound in the venue itself. See how we're able to control our sound, and it gives you something to model yourself after, right? So there's that. Then there's an hour of Q&A, and then we break for 30 minutes to get a little something to eat, and then there's a practical application of what that conversation was for an hour with the kids. So now this is we're really bringing them up on stage. But a thing I just started adding in is right after we finish playing, I ask if anyone wants to come up on stage and play the same music we just got through playing with us. And so it's a way of throwing you in the deep end because I need your body to focus on need to know information. So again, tying back into the idea of attention. When you are in a life or death situation, you become tunnel vision. You're not weighing a bunch of options. You're only focused on need to know information. I say there's three kinds of knowledge. There's need to know, good to know, and there's noise. Need to know is transformative. The good to know is informative, and noise is a distraction. And so oftentimes what happens is when we get good to know information, we don't have an application point for it yet. And so we put it on the shelf in our head. We go, I'll kind of keep this here and I'll pull it down later when I think I need it. But if your brain is constantly trying to digest good to know information, then you're running out of shelf space in your head. And it's funny, once someone tells you what you need to know, there's kind of almost like a push against gravity. Your voice goes up, you go, oh my God, yes, thank you. That's what I need. Oh, yes. Oh, and it's always that, right? And it puts into perspective um, the things that were actually what it does. It helps you to take all the stuff off the shelf that was good to know, and it puts you, and you're able to then appropriately put it in that need to know bucket, and you leave everything else to the side. But if not, then it's hard to make a decision because there's just too many things that are quote unquote good to know. And so when you have to sink or swim, you only have bandwidth to focus on what you need to know. So I'm constantly trying to make kids touch discomfort and pain as much as possible because that's how we all learn is by discomfort, right? And I think we've bubble wrapped children too much in a certain kind of way. And I need you to know what's worth focusing on because I can always tell the kids that actually are having musical experiences because they don't ask me, for lack of a better term, dumb questions. Meaning, like, if I've never seen a strawberry, and yeah, okay, if I've never seen a strawberry, the questions I'm going to ask you about a strawberry will make it very clear I've never actually seen a strawberry. And you're like, this is a waste of time for me to rack my vocabulary to figure out how to explain to you what a strawberry looks like and tastes like. Just go eat a freaking strawberry, then we'll have a conversation, right? And so these kids, they ask me these questions because they're trying to find a way to hedge having to feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, you know what? You're not going to die. It's music for crying out loud. Get on stage, play, and then I'm going to ask you about your experience. And your brain at that point goes solely towards the need to know things. You go, man, it's crazy. I didn't know how to navigate this thing. So then I realized, well, we're in this key. So maybe if I play that note will maybe sustain me somehow. You know what I mean? It's like the prerequisite to swimming is floating. If you can't float, who cares about the strokes? I just need you to not be afraid to jump in the water. Let's get that together.
It's bringing me to that old saying, right? Nothing focuses the mind like, right? So it'd be like, yeah, nothing focuses the mind like a
Mhm.
jazz solo at the behind the scenes workshop, right?
Yes. Yep.
Talk a little bit about your bandmates. Who are you bringing with you to Eugene? Do you know?
Yep. It's my regular working band, two of which are U of O alum,
Ah, cool.
Greg Goebel, piano player, and Garrett Baxter, who just graduated a couple years ago. Now, here's what's interesting about Garrett, and let me, I guess I should tell you who the fourth member is John Nastos, phenomenal saxophonist. So here's what's interesting about Garrett, because I'm 48, my pianist is 47, and the saxophonist is probably 39, I think, going on 40. So Garrett, I think, is probably 27, 26, 27, something like that. I met his high school band director at one of our gigs a year ago, and I didn't know this about him, and it totally changed my perspective of him. He goes, Garrett didn't start playing bass until his senior year in high school. I go, wow, okay. And he goes, the funniest thing about him is that he asked me when he started, what would it take to get a full ride scholarship to college? Now, high school is not 12 months long. You don't even get a full year, right? And somehow, in less than 9 months, he got two full ride scholarships to college. So I asked him, how the hell do you do that? And he goes, well, it's a funny thing. He goes, um, I saw a video of a young man who's a bass player, and I remember this young guy when he was really young because I knew his father back in New Jersey. He goes, I saw a YouTube clip of his audition tape for like the Grammy band or something like that. It's a high school all star group, and he goes, I thought that's where the level started. I didn't know any better. He's like, so I just tried to do that. And every question I've asked him about his development was, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to be able to do that. That's it. And so sometimes our targets are too low. Like I said before, you've got these people, Charlie Parker or whoever. I go, either these people are geniuses or they're thinking about this in a way that I'm not thinking about it. You know,
Hmm.
and I go, okay,
Yes, I was listening to you talk about that, and I was thinking, oh, this really ties in actually with the philosophy of music and education that you were talking about before.
hmm yeah,
Can you give us a little heads up about the things that you might be presenting in Eugene when you visit us on the 29th?
yeah. I mean, I guess I've kind of teased out a few little sort of ideas already. A lot of it is just giving you um, my framework for how I think about um, band leading as well as um, individual growth and knowing what to focus on and what's not worth focusing on, because that's the idea of attention, right? Um, and but simultaneously, so I guess a good way of looking at it is I'm really talking about your relationship with how you grow yourself, and that being a microcosm for how you lead others. And in the process, you're kind of way becoming more educated about how jazz music that we're showing you. Because I can tell you all day long, but then once we start playing, you go, oh, there's that thing. Like
Hmm.
here's a good example. One of the songs that we'll play is a song off my latest record called "Elu's Crown." I played it for back in April for Portland's TEDx conference, and one of the things that I mentioned on stage is when it comes to communication, there's this is an energetic exchange. Words are just a container for energy, right? Like I could be speaking a completely different language from you, but you can kind of get a gist of, am I mad at you? Am I trying to get something out of you? You know what I mean? And so I said to the audience, first, what you have is an emotional agenda. But you can't really see that. You don't notice that until I make a sound, and that's your first inclination as to what direction this is going to go energetically. But then it's supported by the data, which is the words that actually come out. So think about like a baby. Babies can't talk right in the very beginning, but yet they'll cry, and you can tell what the purpose of the different cries are. They said nothing to you. Like you can tell when a baby is hungry, when they're happy, when they're angry, when they. actually hurt themselves. When it's a non-committed cry, when they're just being manipulative, they just want you to give them a cookie or something. Um, they've said nothing to you, but yet you understood everything that you needed to know in that moment about what the baby wanted, all based upon sound, right? So, Matt, so that's it. Just goes back to supporting the overall idea that it's not what you say, but it's how you say it, right? And so, if you're clear on the front end of what the emotional agenda should be, then it helps you to figure out what sequence of words should come out of your mouth. So, for example, think about when you have to reprimand someone. Sometimes we just let words fly. It's like, here's what I want you to know. But if you're clear about what the outcome is, which is like, do I really want to burn this bridge? You know, and if you're like, I really don't care if I never see this person again, then let her rip. Let all the words come out. All right, as visceral as you want them to be. But if you're like, I see this relationship as being something that's worth salvaging, then that informs you then of how your mouth should sound, of how the tone should come out. And in music, what tends to happen, especially in schools, is we are we're tested against the data because it's measurable. Which is, what's the quality of your sound and what's the quality of the content that's coming out of your instrument. But rarely do we get to the part, for some reason, about emotion. Because if your music's not about emotion, then what is it about? It's just about dots on a page. And as a result, if there's no emotional imperative, then every song, by definition, has to sound the same. It's just dots on a page. And so I'll tell you a perfect example of this. This just happened on November 5th, here at the 1905. I only remember that date because I play there the first Wednesday of every month. November 5th, we were on the heels of like 2 weeks of like famous people dying. And one of them was this guy named Jack DeJohnette. He was one of Miles Davis's drummers, and one of the goats of modern jazz drumming. And so he died at 83. My dad's 81. And I was just kind of free associating on the mic about, yeah, these people are passing away, and Jack DeJohnette just passed away, and he's 83. My dad's 81, and I know I don't see my dad as much as I should. And I'm just kind of, again, free associating. So I go, this song's going to go out to all them. And the song was called Before It's Time to Say Goodbye. It's this Kenny Garrett song. And on the record, they just play it pretty kind of flat, almost like what you would expect if you were getting a massage. Like the music doesn't go crazy. And I did that for a reason. One, so I have something to say on the microphone, right, to kind of bring the audience in. But it was also my way of low key conducting the band and telling them what I needed them to do without telling them what I needed them to do. It's like they say, don't tell people how to do something, tell them what needs to be done and let them surprise you with how they do it. So I say that and I go in the back of my head, let's just see what happens. Within a few minutes, like maybe less than that, maybe a minute, I'm starting to see people are starting to cry because they're now thinking about their loved ones who they've lost. And but one of the thoughts that was in my head is, I wonder if the music's going to do what I think it has the potential to do. I go, let's just see what happens. And at that tempo, obviously, playing lots of notes doesn't really get the job done. So the only way for you to impact someone emotionally, like I said, it's not the words, it's the sound. So the saxophonist at one point starts screaming through the saxophone. God, I remember, like, good job, man. That's exactly what I thought this had the potential to do, which is to go through the different stages of grief. First, you're suspended belief. Then you eventually work your way to a climax, just being really angry and pissed. And then in the end, there's acceptance. And that's exactly what the arc did. There was a dry eye in the room.
It is going to be so great to be able to develop these thoughts with you as we listen to you give your presentation. And we're thrilled about the band. So we just really look forward to seeing you on January 29th. And thank you for taking a little time to talk to us today.
Of course, yeah.
I've been speaking with musician Christopher Brown. On January 29th, 2026, he will give a presentation performance, Beyond the Buzz, finding the signal in a noisy world with his jazz band as a guest of the Oregon Humanities Center. UO Today is a production of the Oregon Humanities Center at the University of Oregon. Thanks for listening.